boys and girls. I am back and I'm going to read chapter 12 today. In chapter 11, we learned that Karina's mom's best friend, Mrs. Reinicke, and her husband, they were arrested for harboring Jews in their home. Now Karina is worried about what's going to happen to her parents if they are also caught harboring Jews in their home. So let's find out what Karina will do also, because up to now she is still trying to make a decision if she is going to report her parents or not. So chapter 12. It wasn't until the last few minutes of the young model meeting after school the next day that Karina and Rita had a chance to talk. Karina eyed her friend nervously for a few moments. Then she took a deep breath and said, Rita, do you remember Anita Skynman? That scrawny Jew? That's right. The skinny little thing who used to live next door to me. Do you ever wonder what happened to her? Rita glanced up from her tassel. Every once in a while, why? Well, I wonder too. I mean, what happened to all the Jews who used to live around here? They've been sent east to live with other Jews. They're happier there with their own kind. Do you really think they're happier? Of course they are. Karina nodded in agreement and didn't say anything. Finally, Rita broke the silence between them. Do you think about the Jews a lot? Not a lot, Karina said hastily. Just once in a while. Oh, Rita lowered her voice. I think about them more than just once in a while. Karina raised her gaze from her tassel and stared into Rita's blue eyes. Really? She said. Sure, I almost feel sorry for them. You do? For a moment, Karina felt a wave of suspicion wash over her. Was this some kind was this some kind of a trap? She wondered. She looked around the room, but no one was taking any notice of them. She looked back at Rita, but her friend was intent upon upon her project. Karina felt ashamed of herself for suspecting Rita. Rita was her best friend. It wasn't Rita who was lying and keeping secrets. It was Karina. She was the one not acting like a best friend. I feel sorry for them too, Karina whispered under her breath. I thought you hated Jews, Rita said, also keeping her voice down. I did until a little while ago. As much as she trusted Rita, she just couldn't bring herself to tell her about the Krugmans. Not yet. I don't really hate them, Rita said. I just pretend so people think I do. I always believe you, Karina said. You should be an actress someday. I'd rather be a nurse. Hans told me they need nurses at the war camps to help the doctors who care for the Jews. The camps couldn't be all that bad if they had doctors and nurses attending to the Jews, thought Karina. But somehow it didn't make sense to her to lock up the Jews in war camps and then give them medical care. She couldn't help wondering how much care they actually got. By the way, Karina said, have you seen my black book? Rita raised her pale blonde eyebrows. No, why? I can't find it. I know I had it yesterday. I probably left it at home. It's just that. Let's go, Rita said, interrupting her friend. The leaders were calling all the girls together. Wait for me after the meeting, Karina said, twisting the extra twine into a bow. Oh, I can't, Rita said hastily. Why not? I have to run an errand for my mother. You go on without me, and I'll see you tomorrow. Karina nodded slowly. Okay, she said, trying to shrug away the uneasy feeling that suddenly settled on her shoulders like a heavy, itchy wool sweater. I'll see you tomorrow. As soon as Karina walked in the door, her mother called to her from the kitchen. What is it, mother? She said when she saw the drawn look on her mother's face. Sit down, Karina, Prauram said. Karina sat down at the table where her mother was peeling and cutting carrots. Cut onions were also on the table, no doubt, accounting for the teary look in her mother's eyes. I've told you about her, Krugman, and Ruth, Sophie's husband and 14-year-old daughter. Yes, mother, you mentioned them. Rachel talks about Ruth all the time. What happened? Is something wrong? It's Ruth, her mother said slowly. She had pneumonia for weeks, but nothing could be done. She died last night. Karina sat in stunned silence. All she could imagine was Rachel's face when she heard the news. Do Frau Kregmans and Rachel know? Karina's mother nodded. I told them as soon as I heard. Why couldn't they call a doctor? There was no doctor in the area where could be trusted. Frau Rem said sadly, they did what they could for her, but living above a barn where it was cold and damp was the worst thing for her. Why didn't they move her? Karina demanded. She couldn't rid herself of the image of Rachel proudly bragging about her older sister. She must be devastated. The family that was hiding her couldn't move her. There was no safe place to go at that time, explained her mother. So she got up from the table and came around to hug her daughter. I'm so lucky to have you, Liebling, she said softly. Karina felt her throat tighten. Can I go see Rachel? Frau Rim hesitated. You can try. I don't know if she'll see you, though. Karina nodded and went upstairs. In her room, she quietly deposited her book bag by the wardrobe and then pulled the curtain over her window closed. She didn't care if it looked suspicious. She thought with a sudden flare of anger. It wasn't fair that she had to sneak around and try to act normal when everything was so mixed up. She knocked on the wall. Slowly she opened up the wardrobe and looked into the dimly lit room. Hello, Frau Kragman, she said softly, crouching down before the woman. For a moment they just stared at each other in silence. Can Rachel come out for a while? Sophie looked sadly at her daughter, who was curled up in a small mattress she used as a bed at night and play area during the day. Rachel, do you want to play with Karina? Rachel shook her head. Come out and draw with me, Karina said. I never want to draw again, Rachel said in a trembling voice. Then just come out and sit with me, Karina coaxed. I don't feel very happy and I need someone to keep me company. Rachel lifted her tear-stained face. Slowly she crawled over to the opening and Karina smiled at her encouragingly. Karina pulled away from the back room, leaving space for Rachel to come out. Then she pushed the skrank back against the wall and focused on the little girl sitting cross-legged on the floor in front of her. She looked so small, so fragile, so innocent. Why are you staring at me? Rachel asked in a small, tremulous voice. I was just wondering if you look like Ruth, Karina said softly. Ruth is dead, Rachel cried. Karina waved her hands through the air. I know she's dead out here, but in here, she pointed to Rachel's heart. She'll live as long as you do. As long as you remember her and think of her and love her. Rachel eyed her suspiciously. But I'll never see her again. But in a way, you can see her whenever you want. Just close your eyes and think of her, and she'll be there. A small, hopeful look came over the little girl's face. Do you remember what Ruth looked like? Karina asked, reaching for some paper and some colored pencils she kept in the drawer in her desk. Rachel nodded solemnly. Then why don't you draw her picture so you'll never forget? Then in 10 years from now, you can look at these pictures and remind yourself what Ruth looked like. Rachel hesitantly took the paper and pencils. Then, with increasing determination, she started to draw. Karina smiled at the girl and lifted one of her school books from her book bag. She opened the heavy volume and began to read, while Rachel drew picture after picture of her sister Ruth. When Frau Rim came up with supper for the Krugmans, Karina took the pile of drawings from Rachel and began to look through them. This is Ruth playing the piano, Rachel said seriously. She was the best in the whole world. And this is Ruth at home, lying on her bed. She did that a lot when she wasn't playing the piano. One by one, Rachel explained each drawing. Karina smiled and nodded at the appropriate moments. Though the smile felt awkward, the little girl didn't seem to notice. You can keep this one with the others I gave you, Rachel said, handing Karina a drawing. Thank you very much, Karina said. Now I think it's time for you to eat. She opened the wardrobe and passed in the food her mother had left for the Krugman supper. She left the wardrobe ajar to let fresh air into the closed-up space, and she put Rachel's drawing on her desk. It was a drawing of Ruth holding a bouquet of multicolored flowers staring out of the paper. Karina's heart jumped as it had when she'd been looking through Rachel's many drawings. In this one, as in all the others, Ruth's hair was sunshine yellow, not dark, as it should have been, and her eyes were light blue instead of brown. She looked like Karina, and Karina realized sadly that Rachel had already forgotten what her older sister had looked like. That's sad. That's the sad news in chapter 12. But the good news is we are going to continue listening chapter 13 tomorrow. So for now, enjoy the rest of the day.